A woman in her early 50s walked into a wellness clinic. She's still functioning, still working, still exercising. From the outside, she looks fine, but inside she feels as though something essential has dulled. Her thoughts feel slower, words slip away mid-sentence, and she opens emails and rereads the same paragraph again and again. She walks into a room and forgets why she's there. Someone told her this is brain fog. She's led into a softly lit room and asked to recline in a chair. A fitted headband is placed around her scalp. Small pads or coils are positioned carefully against her head. Thin wires run from the device to a console beside her, and she's told the device will stimulate specific parts of her brain, that it will help her quiet the noise, sharpen focus, and lift the fog. She closes her eyes. There is no discussion about menopause, no discussion about sleep quality, no discussion about stress, physiology, or metabolic change. Just stimulation and hope. And this is where we need to slow down, because what happens next captures something very important about how we now relate to the mind. In recent years, there has been a growing interest in brain stimulation therapies, often grouped together in popular conversation, but technically quite different from one another. Some clinics offer transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS, and this uses rapidly changing magnetic fields generated by a coil placed near the scalp to induce electrical currents in targeted brain regions. TMS has been studied for conditions such as major depressive disorder and migraine, and in medical settings, it is delivered in repeated sessions under strict protocols. Other devices uses transcranial electrical stimulation, such as low-level direct or alternating electrical currents applied through electrodes on the scalp. These currents are weaker than those used in TMS and are designed to subtly alter cortical excitability rather than directly triggering neuronal firing. There are also devices that stimulate the nervous system indirectly, such as the vagus nerve stimulation wearables, which target peripheral nerves rather than the brain itself. Brand names often mentioned in the public space include ExoMind, eNeuroscience, Spring TMS, and Pulsetto. Although it is important to understand that these devices do not all work the same way, do not target the same anatomy, and are not interchangeable, simply because they are marketed for brain or nervous system optimization. But what they share as a promise that altering neural signaling from the outside can improve how we think and feel on the inside. And this promise is not entirely unfounded. There are legitimate studies behind these brain stimulation technologies. In clinical research, TMS has been shown to have measurable benefit in some patients with treatment-resistant depression. Meta-analysis suggests that repeated sessions can reduce depressive symptoms more than just sham treatment in selected populations. Electrical stimulation techniques have demonstrated small effects on mood, pain perception, and reaction time in laboratory settings. But here's the part that rarely makes it into marketing language. Many of these studies involve relatively small sample sizes. Outcomes are often subjective, relying on self-reported mood or perceived clarity. And when researchers follow participants weeks or months later, the benefits frequently diminish unless treatment is continued. Even researchers who are supportive of these technologies tend to describe the effects as modest, variable, and highly dependent on context. People who try these devices often describe a familiar experience. They feel calmer, clearer, lighter, as though mental noise has been turned down. That experience is real. The nervous system can respond to stimulation, novelty, and expectation, but the critical question is this: does that clarity remain when sleep is disrupted, hormones fluctuate, and stress increases? To answer that, we need to step away from the clinic. And let's step instead into a wooden training hall in 17th century Japan. One of the most famous samurai in history was Miyamoto Musashi. He fought more than 60 duels and never lost. He later wrote the Book of Five Rings, a text still studied for its insights into strategy, conflict, and human psychology. Musashi believed that battles were decided before swords ever crossed. In one of the most famous duels, he faced Sasaki Kajiro, a swordsman known for his technical brilliance. Musashi arrived deliberately late. Kajiro grew impatient, angry. His breathing changed, his attention narrowed. Musashi observed this shift and knew the outcome was already determined. When the duel began, it ended almost immediately, one strike. Musashi later wrote that victory belonged to the one whose mind remained undisturbed. This was not mysticism. It was psychological training applied under pressure. Musashi taught that the mind takes the shape of its habits. Throughout his writings, he returned again and again to the same idea. The mind you rely on in moments of pressure is the mind you have trained through daily repetition. He warned that whatever you rehearse internally becomes what you default to externally, especially when stress, fear, or uncertainty appear. If you rehearse avoidance, avoidance will surface when discomfort arises. If you rehearse agitation, agitation will surface when things go wrong. If you rehearse clarity, restraint, and observation, then those are the qualities that appear under pressure. For Musashi, daily practice mattered more than talent. One of Musashi's most challenging teachings was this: do not run from discomfort. He trained himself to remain present with fear, physical pain, hunger, fatigue, and emotional irritation, not to suppress these experiences, but to observe them without reacting. He understood that emotions arise naturally. Suffering begins when we obey them. In modern neuroscience language, this is the cultivation of emotional regulation and stress tolerance, allowing signals from the nervous system to arise without letting them hijack behavior. The samurai did not train the mind to feel good. They trained the mind to remain clear while feeling bad. Today, when we feel foggy, anxious, or overwhelmed, we often ask what can remove the feeling quickly now. What pill, device, treatment, or intervention can make it stop? Relief is not wrong, but exclusive reliance on relief teaches the nervous system that discomfort is intolerable. The samurai trained the opposite lesson. Discomfort is temporary. Observation is permanent. Reaction is optional. Now return to the woman in the clinic. She opens her eyes after her session. She does feel clearer, calmer, relieved. That relief is real. But weeks later, the fog returns because nothing fundamental has changed. Sleep remains fragmented. Hormones continue to shift. The nervous system has not been trained to remain steady under load. The device altered her state, but it did not train her mind. Here is the quietly uncomfortable question. If these devices are trying to stimulate certain brain networks or calm the nervous system, is it possible to do the same thing without any device at all? Modern neuroscience suggests the answer is yes. Functional MRI studies show that regular meditation alters activity in the prefrontal cortex, anterior cingulate cortex, and insula, regions involved in attention, emotional regulation, interoceptive awareness. These are some of the networks that electrical and magnetic stimulation attempts to modulate. Long-term meditators also showed reduced amygdala reactivity, meaning the brain becomes less likely to trigger fear and stress responses to the same stimuli. Even more interesting is what happens to the autonomic nervous system. Slow, controlled breathing and mindfulness-based practices increase vagal tone, reflected in higher heart rate variability, a marker of parasympathetic nervous system activation. In other words, meditation can stimulate the vagus nerve naturally without external devices. Devices provide external stimulation. Meditation trains internal control. One creates a temporary state, the other builds a lasting capacity. Now, this raises an uncomfortable but necessary question. If disciplined mental training can activate many of the same neural and autonomic pathways as these devices, why is it not marketed with the same enthusiasm? Part of the answer is cultural. We live in an era of instant gratification where effortless solutions are easier to sell than slow mastery. But there is also a simpler, less flattering explanation. Meditation cannot be patented, packaged, or monetized in the same way. Techniques that are free, self-directed, and require no ongoing dependency do not generate recurring revenue. The samurai understood this intuitively. They did not outsource calm, they embodied it. Because the hardest part of training the mind was never neurological, it was psychological. You are not what you want, you are not what you believe, you are what you practice, especially when things are uncomfortable.